Hi guys, today we are working on step 4 of our project, and this is the last step of our project before it goes into the kiln for the first time. Okay, so I have my clay pot here in my bag. Okay, remember we wrap this up carefully. Okay, and remember we were also storing this with the foot upward so that it would set up nicely as well. Okay, if I had this the other way, there was a chance that this would be too heavy and the foot might push in the base of my pot, and I don't want that to happen. Okay, so I have my pot here, and I'm going to grab one of these wheels right here. Okay, so this is located on the wire rack with the water buckets. Okay, and they turn. Okay, so please be careful with these. Remember, these are a tool, not a toy. Okay, but whenever you pick this up, you don't want to pick it up from the top because it comes out. It's two separate pieces here. Okay, and so this kind of comes up, and we don't want to accidentally drop this on our shoe. So grab it from the base whenever you grab that. Okay, you're also going to get a sponge that looks like this, one of these smaller, smaller poured sponges, and a bucket of water here. Okay, I know that you might have this little guy here in your container still, and that's helping kind of keep up the moisture level, but we don't want to use this one because of the difference in the pores, right? So if you look at the holes here, right, this one is bigger, they're kind of irregular, these are a little bit smaller, and they're a little bit smoother, okay? So this is just for moisture purposes. This is our clay tool specifically. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully take my pot. I'm going to set this right up here, and I'm going to have it kind of with the foot up to start off with. Okay, get you adjusted here. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sponge right here. I'm going to dip it into my container. I'm going to squeeze out the extra water because we don't want too much water. Okay, because right now your pot is probably kind of leather hard. Okay, and that's the way that you want it. And you don't want to get it too soft. So if you have too much moisture, you'll get it way too soft, and then you'll have to wait to start this, the carving step. Okay, so I have this, and what I'm doing is I'm just going to kind of go through and use one hand to turn the wheel and the other hand to just kind of smooth things out a little bit. Okay, so I'm just kind of smoothing through here. Okay, I can do the same thing. You'll notice that you'll get a little bit of clay on your sponge. That's totally normal. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with the foot just to kind of clean things up because I want to make sure I have a good surface to start on before I start carving in. Nice and smooth there. Okay, so I'm just kind of working this around. And again, I'm using a super light pressure. I don't want to press too hard. And I'm making sure that I don't have too much water here. So if you'll notice, the clay is getting smoother, but again, I'm not having the issue of it getting, super shiny because it's, too moist. Okay, so I'm just kind of working this through on the bottom part now. Okay, just kind of smoothing it out. I'm going to work on this side a little bit more over here. And this just kind of helps smooth things out a little bit more before you get onto your next step. Okay. All right. So for our next step, we're going to talk about putting our design onto our pot, and we're going to talk about what to do and what not to do. Okay, guys, so we have two examples here that look pretty similar. Okay, we have two letter A's with some polka dots. Okay, and one of these is the correct way and one of these is not the correct way. Okay, I wonder if you can guess. If you saw this one and you thought that this was correct, you were wrong. Okay, the reason why this one is not great is because this is just simply drawn into it. There's not a lot of craftsmanship going on here. It's kind of sketchy, okay? And this one is actually carved in, okay? And we're practicing carving into clay. So we want to make sure, of course, that we're doing the carving part, not just the drawing in with our paper clip, okay? I am going to show you how to take this one and turn it in to this one. The reason why this one is really nice is because we practiced carving and removing some clay, but also whenever you go to glaze this, you can actually get, if you wanted a different color for the letter A as opposed to the background, you can actually get that in there. As it dries and kind of shrinks up a little bit, it'll still look nice. It won't look too crowded. Okay. And same thing with our shapes here. Okay. This one took me maybe like 10 seconds to do. It didn't take very long. Your clay might shrink up to where you might not be able to see your design as much. Okay. And it doesn't give you, really a whole lot of artistic skill here. Okay. So I'm going to show you how to turn this one into a carved one like this. Okay. So whenever you're first starting out, you will actually draw on your design using the pointed side of the paper clip, just to kind of get that on there. You don't want to obviously cut through, right? This A looks like it's a little bit deep, but you're just going to draw on there. And so if I wanted to add on like a triangle or something like that right here, I would just kind of lightly draw this on there. Okay. Again, you don't want to press through, especially with the flower pot. Okay. But in order to take that into a carving, I do my preliminary lines and then I turn my paper clip over to this rounded area and I'm going to use this to carve out stuff. Okay, so let's look at this letter A. What I'm doing for this is I'm essentially taking the shape of the end of the paper clip here, which is what I used, right? So imagine a really thin indentation, and I'm actually going to turn that into a V shape. So if you kind of look at this here, it's kind of hard to see, huh? It does kind of have a V shape to it. It makes it a little bit wider, a little bit bolder, and it makes it look a little bit nicer. Okay, so what I'm doing is I don't want to just go directly down like this. I'm actually going to put the side of my paper clip into my indentation that I've already made, and I'm going to just take off this little corner right here. Just like this. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing again, except this time, instead of bringing it down this way, I'm going to turn my paper clip and I'm going to work on this wall, just taking off this corner just a little bit here. Okay. And then I have this little bit of clay that got kind of smudged up, so I'm going to carefully take that off of there. Okay. And if I want to kind of widen this a little bit, I can do so. Okay. So I'm just taking a little bit at a time. Okay. Now I'm going to move on to this other side over here, doing the same steps. Okay, so all I'm doing is I'm putting the edge of the paper clip into that section. I'm kind of turning it a little bit and just lightly coasting along here and taking off that side a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing again, going the opposite direction for the other side of my indentation. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the middle here. Okay, so I'm going to be a little more careful for this part just because it's a smaller section and because there is an intersection. Okay, so I'm going to do both sides like that. And then if you like this extra little clay, thing here, you can do that. I don't love it, so I'm just going to go through and lightly kind of take this out just a little bit more. Just like that. Okay, so I have my letter A completed. Now, there are other options, right? So say that you did a block letter, kind of like we have these shapes here. You have a couple of options. So you can either cut into the shape. So if I were to carve this out, I would basically just kind of start scooping around in a circle here, taking out this extra clay and setting it to the side. Just like this. Okay, and then of course it's always good to kind of move these things around. Just like so. Okay, and then you can kind of work on, if you want to make it a little bit deeper, you can do that. And then you kind of work on smoothing it out. So for the smoothing out process, I would probably just kind of take my finger and kind of help smooth it out a little bit there. Okay, so that's an option for you. Or if you want the polka dots or whatever shapes to come out a little bit, you can do the opposite. So instead of carving on the inside, you can actually carve a little bit around the outside. And the way that that looks here is I'm just taking a little bit. So I kind of carve around my circle first, just very carefully, taking off just a little bit, okay? You don't want to take off a crazy amount of clay. But I'm kind of just broadening the outline, kind of like I did with the A, except I'm taking just a little bit more off on the outer part. Okay. Then what I want to do is, because I don't want to make it look like I just made a really broad outline, what I'll do is I will lightly kind of shave off some of this extra clay so that there is a smooth transition from one thickness to the next. Okay, so I kind of take off this extra bit around here. Okay, and I kind of almost like feathering a little bit. I just kind of lightly work through here. Okay, so that my circle pops out. Okay, and then you can go back and fix that as needed, right? And we're just using the loopy side of our paper clip. Okay, the reason why I like the paper clip for this, we do have some other tools, they're called ribbon tools, which are helpful, but with those, it is too easy to take off way too much clay. Okay, and you definitely don't want to do that, especially if you've already gone through all of these steps and you only have a few days left of the project and you can see the finish line in sight. You definitely don't want to have any mishaps there. Okay, so I really like the paper clips just because it's easier to just kind of give, just take a small amount, be a little bit more intentional with it. Okay, and then I have a little bit of indentions here, and if I wanted to leave them because I like that texture, I could do that. Some people choose to do that. If I wanted to smooth it out, I can use my finger to smooth it out. Your clay will be a little bit harder than this. This right here is still pretty soft, and your clay will be leather hard, and so you might need a tiny bit of water to kind of smooth it out a little bit, but you can totally do that. Okay, so that's how we make a circle stand out a little bit, or how we kind of recess a circle by carving into it. And that's how we make our letter A look a lot better than it did. Okay, so those are the steps for carving in. Okay, we're being graded on actually carving in those things. If you wanted to add something to the surface of yours, right? So say that you were adding, I don't know, whatever detail, and say that you had a little coil of clay. There's a couple things. One, you want to make sure that it doesn't stand out too much from your pot. So for example, if you wanted, I'm just going to use a cat as an example. If you wanted to have cat ears, okay, you cannot have them standing out this far because this will definitely break off. This is way too thin. Okay, if you wanted to have something like cat ears, you would make a really small version of cat ears. Okay, and you would want to make sure that you have a good base to it. Okay, so say, for example, I had this little triangle that I wanted to use as a cat ear, and I wanted to put it on the top part, on the edge of my pot, right? You would do that, and then you would score and slip those, okay? It's extremely important to make sure you're scoring and slipping those, okay? And then after you've scored and slipped them, you go through the same steps. You let it sit for a little bit, and then you work on smoothing those seams out. Okay, and I'm not going to show you how to score and slip here just because we've practiced it several times already, but you have to do the scoring and slipping. And then after it's on there, of course, you want to smooth it out so that you can't see the seam, right? Just like we practiced on the rest of our steps in our project. Okay, if you wanted to have something, so say that you did do a cat and you wanted to have a cat tail, okay, and say that this is the tail that I wanted to use. Instead of having it come out of the flower pot, you could have it kind of wrap around and still be attached to the flower pot, but it's three-dimensional, and so it still looks like it could be a tail. This one definitely looks like a mouse tail instead of a cat tail, but you get the idea. The same thing is if you're attaching a separate piece of clay to it, you have to score and slip both pieces, put them on there, and then try to kind of work on that seam a little bit. Okay, so that's what you want to do if you want to attach some smaller pieces. Again, you don't want anything really like sticking out too much. If you do, you need to keep it pretty small and compact. Okay, you also want to make sure that you have a decent base to it. So even if I only had part of this, okay, the base of this is not wide enough to really stick on there. Okay, you would want to make it a lot flatter at the base. Think about like a carrot almost, or a cone, so that you have a surface to actually score and slip to put something on there. Okay, so that is the steps that we're doing for that. Okay, when you get to working on yours, you're going to have your wheel and your, there we go, your pot on top. Okay, and then once you've done your sponge stuff, I've kind of let mine dry out just a little bit just to make sure it's still good to go. You'll carefully, very carefully turn it over. Okay, you can also sponge the inside just a little bit. I'll probably get to that here in just a second, right? And then whenever you start your design, right, you'll carefully, very lightly work on drawing out your design first, and then you'll start your carving. Okay, so if you wanted to have, say that I wanted to have like the letter A on here or whatever, I would just lightly draw that first, right? And then I would very, very carefully start carving into it. Okay, while you're doing this, you of course want to make sure that you're not pressing too hard. It's always good to take your hand and put it on the inside to kind of help brace against the other side to keep it in one spot, so that you can have more success with that. And then of course, if you're like, wow, that A looks terrible, a lot of times you can use if you didn't press too deep, if you didn't press too hard, you can use your finger to kind of help sponge it out, or you can come back to your sponge, squeeze out all that extra water, because remember, we don't want that much water, and then just kind of go over it to erase it, as long as you didn't press too deep. Okay, so if you kind of goof a little bit, you do have a little bit of wiggle room, but you want to be very careful about it. Okay, so those are our steps. The nice thing about these wheels is that you can move it around as needed, and it keeps it a little bit higher off the table, so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so that is for step 4. Once you're finished with this, you're basically done, right? What you're going to do is you're going to take your pot, once it's fully carved, you're going to carefully turn it upside down again, because we want to store our pot upside down so that it can dry more evenly that way. And so I have my pot upside down, and we are going to put it on a specific cart. I have my name on there. Okay, we're going to have it on a specific cart, and then we'll leave it there to let it start drying. Okay, so right now it's in my leather hard stage. It's going to get lighter and lighter as it dries out. Okay, if yours goes past the leather hard stage before you put it onto the cabinet, or onto the cart, even though you're done, you want to be extremely careful, because that's when it's at its most fragile. That's when it's most likely to just shatter. If you were to drop it, or if you were to bump it on something, you want to be super, super, super careful with it. Okay. And so those are the steps for this. Again, you're going to have it resting with the foot upward. Okay, but while you're designing it, you can have it upright like you normally would. Okay, so that's it for step 4.